Okay, and I am live by the looks of it. So, trust the settings, Jim. So, we're having trouble streaming to a destination. I assume that trouble is with Rumble. Yeah, Rumble. So, having problems getting through to Rumble. Please check the destination to ensure the stream looks okay. If this continues for a while, try creating a new broadcast. Now, will I check on? I might have a quick look at the Rumble and see what's actually going on. Rumble. Obviously, I can't do anything, even if it's not working. It's not working. So, Raconteurs after dark. How do you tell which is the live stream? I have no idea. I have no idea. So, anyway, obviously, we're not streaming to Rumble. So, anyway, this is the first show in a small series about seed propagation. And the old chat looks quiet tonight. So, I think what I'll do is I'll just plow on. And people can catch up on the Sega. How you doing? Are you well? Thanks for joining in. So the questions came up there a few times. How you, Chris? About propagation and how to get seeds going and horticultural questions in general. So I do have some knowledge in this particular field, so and I suppose it's only appropriate. This is the right time of the year to be covering some of these topics. So I chose the subject tonight to talk about, which will be seed propagation. It's a little bit different than what I normally do. So normally I'm just taking the piss and laughing at the news cycle. So it should be interesting to go down a cover a different topic. So how you doing, Denny? How you well, buddy? So seed propagation. I'm not entirely sure where to start with this whole topic, really. Like, and I didn't put a whole lot much research into it. I don't have to research because, like, some things you just know instinctually, right? But where do you start? So, I thought where I might start is what I've decided to do is I'm going to try to combine various videos. I'm going to try to combine stuff. Hi, Paula. I'm going to try to combine information from my trusty Bible here, a handbook for horticultural students. It's a brilliant book, Like it absolutely tells you everything that you're ever going to need to know. That's the book I learned from when studying for my level 5 qualification, and it brings in a lot of basics. It brings in a hell of a lot of basics, but it also gives you a little bit of a leg up into the sciencey end of it as well too. So, but obviously, seed propagation is probably the most essential skill. Like it's a lot more complicated than just throwing a few seeds into the soil, for example. Because if we want to have like really good success, because if you just throw the seeds out into the ground, like you're liable to run into a lot of problems, basically. Um, Usually, like for us here in the northern hemisphere, a lot of the problems could be weather related, like too wet, too cold. Um, Also, like hailstones can be terrible. Hailstones can do a lot of damage early on in the year because, like, especially like when you've just put your carrots or your parsnips out, and if the hailstones start falling on your little seedlings, like that, they can basically wipe a crop out. But there's there's lots of things we can do to alleviate that. Actually, parsnips are not too bad, but I've always had trouble with carrots and stuff like that. And obviously, like, we're not going to be propagating carrots and parsnips in the propagation unit for various reasons, which I'll probably discuss a little bit later on. But I think where I would probably start is I found a little video earlier on, and for anybody who is not familiar, basically, with the basics of how a seed germinates, and this might be helpful because it's good to know the different parts of the plant and and the functions they perform. Let's see, where can seed germination? I think this was a short video, so um, yeah, and I don't want it to play straight away. Just give me a break till I get set up here. Whoops. It's not playing ball.
Germination is the
Okay, now it's playing ball. Right. Now, let me get OBS ready. So, this is a short little video basically which explains the process of what happens like when a seed actually germinates, and it will show you all the various different parts of the little seedling which are sort of like at play, and describe the different parts of the seed and what's inside the seed, and so you'll just have an idea of how an actual seed emerges from the soil. So we'll just sit back and we'll watch this, and um, hopefully this little video, it's short, it's sweet, and hopefully it will just explain the basics of it.
start of growth of a plant from a seed. It's that first stage where the seed sprouts to become a seedling. Let's start by having a close look at the structure of a seed. Inside a seed is a plumule, which will go on to become the first plant shoot, and a radicle, which will form the first root. Seeds also have cotyledons, which act as a food store for the new plant until it's able to carry out photosynthesis. And they also have a seed coat, which forms a protective layer. If we look at the cross-section of this seed, you can see the plumule, radicle, 2 cotyledons, and a seed coat around the outside. As germination progresses, you can see a root system become established and the first shoot and leaves developing from what was the plumule. A few days later, the shoot has emerged from the cotyledons. You can see here the cotyledons have become leaf-like structures. These are known as seed leaves. They are green and able to carry out photosynthesis until the first true leaves, developed from the plumule, are established. Looking at all 3 stages side by side, you can see the changes over time. So what do seeds need to germinate? Let's start with some assumptions that people often make. Not all of these are correct, by the way. First, we usually make seeds grow by putting them in soil. So maybe seeds need soil to germinate. If you plant a seed, you water it. So water seems sensible. All plants need sunlight, so perhaps germinating seeds do too. Photosynthesis requires carbon dioxide, so that's a reasonable guess. Plants must respire, so perhaps the seeds need oxygen for respiration. Let's look closer at each of those ideas. First up, soil. Here are some seeds that are placed on wet tissue for a few days, and they're germinating just fine. No soil in sight. No, soil is not needed for germination. Water? Yes, essential for germination. Dormant seeds are dry, but the chemical reactions for growth and development can only take place in solution when molecules are free to move. What about sunlight? Well, remember, seeds can't carry out photosynthesis. Instead, they get their food from cotyledons. What's more, seeds often germinate while buried in soil where there's complete darkness. So, no, sunlight is generally not needed. There are exceptions to that, but I won't go into them today. Next, carbon dioxide. Well, we know this is required for photosynthesis, but think again about our soon-to-germinate seed. There are no leaves, and there's often no light, so no photosynthesis. So no, carbon dioxide is not required for germination. What about oxygen for respiration? Yes, this one is essential. Growth and development require energy, and this is released via respiration. Remember that this type of respiration requires glucose and oxygen. Glucose is already supplied in the seed from the cotyledons, but oxygen must be supplied from the air if germination is to succeed. There's one more thing: a warm temperature. Remember that pretty much all chemical reactions in living organisms require enzymes. For reactions involving enzymes, it can't be so hot that the enzymes are destroyed, or so cold that the molecules move too slowly. For successful germination, we need a warm temperature that's just right. The main summary of this video is that germination is the start of growth of a plant from a seed. For germination to happen, seeds require water, oxygen, and a warm temperature.
So there we go. That's essentially, well, he's more or less correct there about practically everything he said there, in my estimation. So basically, he is missing one key thing, basically, as well, too, which he didn't actually quite mention, which was you also need time. So another essential ingredient, according to my manual, the handbook for horticultural science, is you need time as well. So what he's covered there now is basically you need water, you need temperature, you need oxygen, um, food. It needs food, but that's complicated, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a little while because obviously a plant has everything it needs uh, as it emerges. So it's another grey area. Light is kind of essential for some seeds. Now, not all seeds, but there are a few. And one example that I can think of basically is a parsnip seed. A parsnip seed needs a little bit of light. So normally when you sow a parsnip seed, you would leave it exposed to the sunlight for maybe half an hour to an hour. I actually haven't looked up why that is, and it's probably something I could do to further my knowledge on the aspects of light and germination. But because it's not required for all seeds, it's never been high on my radar. And then, of course, uh, so light is kind of non-essential. We can rule light out like for most seeds, and then of course time, and we need time to let things develop and grow. So water is essential, but we have to be careful with water as well too. And I'll discuss this in a few minutes when I get down to talking about propagation and how to manage things in a propagator. Because, essentially, if you want to give your plants a good start, ideally you'd want to start them indoors and maybe on a warm windowsill, or if you've splashed out and like myself and you've got yourself a little propagation unit. Propagation unit is really, really great because that provides you the basal heat that you need. Just that's that heat he's talking about, that bit of warmth, and you're looking at that kind of like a sweet spot of warmth where it's not too hot and where it's not too cold. And we're kind of looking at temperatures between, say, 19 degrees to 21 degrees, which is ideal for seed germination. So that's the kind of temperature he's. I know he didn't mention it, but according to the best manuals that I can get my hands on, 21 degrees would seem to be the actual sweet spot, when it comes to the necessary heat. But if you any propagation unit that you will buy on the market, will have a probably preset 20, 21 degrees. Some of them are actually adjustable, but most of them just come preset, so you generally don't have to worry about the temperature. That's all baked into the pie. So food is not essential for the seedling when it's coming out, basically, because if you remember in the video, he was talking about the cotyledons, which is like the two leaves, the first two leaves, and they're not actually leaves, by the way. They're not really true leaves. So the first thing that come out are your cotyledons, which are the first two, and they actually provide all the food that your plant is going to need, which is why you don't need to feed plants a very, very rich compost. at the beginning, and there's good reason not to give them too much compost, too rich compost in the beginning. How are you doing, Tony and Kendo? Thanks for joining in. Fair play. Say hello to Watcher. Thanks for joining in. Did I say hello to Dinny? I don't think I did. And Paula, I think I said hello to. So I think I'm up to date. And guys, if you have questions, put them in all caps. And if I can answer them, I'll try my best. If I don't have an answer, I'm not going to bullshit you, right? So I'll just say I don't know. But so we're discussing at the moment now the essentials for what it takes to get a seedling to actually start and to germinate. So we've discussed the water, we've discussed the temperature, the oxygen. The oxygen is also another key component. And there's ways that we can sort of like introduce oxygen into the environment. Like obviously it doesn't need oxygen above ground because you see it has not emerged yet, but you need oxygen below the ground as well too. So, and this is why sometimes if you sow seeds into a very, very compact soil, you're going to get very, very bad results like most of the time, because especially if the soil is not being used very much, it's compressed. There's no air in there, so there's no chemical reaction like with the root hairs, because there's a chemical reaction that happens like when the roots start to emerge, and you got this chemical reaction with the water and the microbes in the soil, and they need oxygen because it gets very, very warm down below ground once plants start growing. It is quite warm down there, so because they do generate quite a bit of heat as they grow, because they're burning energy. There's a huge chemical reaction going on. So oxygen is very, very essential. I'll talk about how we get the oxygen into the soil a little bit further into the show, so we won't focus on it too much just at the moment. So oxygen is an essential. The food we've covered, the light I've covered. It's basically a non-essential. And the time, of course, because it takes time, because like you put a seed onto a propagator or onto your windowsill, it needs that week or two to get going, but it also needs the temperatures right. So, but there's things we can do to assist in raising the temperature, even if we don't have a propagator. So I'll get into that a little bit further into the show. So when we're talking about, we've spoken about the essentials that a seed needs to get going. Now, one of the things we generally use, you've seen the guy there in the video. He was putting sprouts. He was basically sprouting them on a piece of cotton, and that's okay for some seeds, but in general, we don't want to do it that way at all, really. What we will be using is we really need a soil medium, basically. So we'll be using a type of compost. Generally a seed compost. Now we don't want to use a seed compost is better for various reasons. Now a seed compost. How you doing, Mick? Thanks for joining. A seed compost is kind of like it's different than your standard compost. Put it this way: like a usual standard compost is usually very, very rich in nutrients. It's got a lot of nutrient packed in there, and that's a bad medium to use for seedlings, because of the fact that when the seedling emerges, the food store, everything that plant needs to get going is stored within those little cotyledons that I was talking about. The first leaves that you see coming out at the sides, they're not leaves, but they do. You can call them leaves, but they're actually a food store. So a seedling has nearly everything it needs to get going from the start. Now, you can run into problems if you give too rich of a compost mixture to a seedling, just when it's trying to get going. It can be very, very, if the mixture is too rich, the plants will grow much too quickly. And then you run the risk of getting way too much leaf growth. They'll grow probably way too leggy, too quickly, and you'll stress the plant out, and they'll just end up burning themselves out because they're growing too quick. Where when in fact if you try to contain them and let them just develop naturally at a slower rate, you have a better chance of increasing your success within the propagation area. So it's a good idea not to give not to use like a rich compost mixture. So if you're going to go and search for a compost that is ideal, you can get these, like there's John Innes, there's John Innes, or you can even make your own, like from peat and a few different types of lime. But in general, like, for the standard home grower, like you won't have to bother with stuff like that. That's mostly for propagation units, like that be turning out hundreds of thousands of plants, for example. Like, they'd make up their own compost mixtures, and they'd buy raw peat in. Raw peat is not great because it's very acidic for a start, and it's got absolutely no nutrient whatsoever in it. Like it's too acidic almost for seedlings. So you just bog standard peat moss. Try to avoid that if you can. Like it'll probably get you out of trouble. Maybe in a fix, like, but you have to be aware that it's not an ideal soil medium to be using. So, like, if you're going to be choosing a medium, choose something that's going to be. But you can get away with. You could get away with. Like, I've used all types of compost because usually I dilute my compost down, anyway. Uh, uh, and this brings me on to, like, the oxygen side. How do you get the oxygen into the soil to get that chemical reaction around the roots? And that's where a little substance called it's called perlite. I don't know if anybody's familiar with perlite or vermiculite. Um, it could be described as a God, what would you call it? It's baked clay, basically. As far as I remember, it's actually baked clay. But if you were to hold a piece of it in your hand, and it's almost like, feels like styrofoam. It's got that sort of a texture to it. It's kind of like foamy. So what we'd normally do, like with the soil medium, so we'd get our seedling compost, or whatever's at hand. If you can't get seedling compost, look, go for the standard compost. Sometimes, beggars can't be choosers. So don't try to fret too much about it. Like, but just be aware that, like, pure hardcore compost for mature plants is generally a little bit too rich. So it's worth keeping that in mind. So we would take, say, we would do a mix. If we were going to do up a mix for seedlings, what I would do here at home basically is I would get X amount of compost, and then I'd do a 50-50 mix of vermiculite and compost, right? And when all that vermiculite is mixed through it, it gives you a kind of like a very, very loose, crumbly sort of like, and there's what the vermiculite does, it creates loads of gaps and spaces in the compost for the roots to expand, and for air and for water to get out. And the vermiculite also holds onto water too, so it's also a store of water as well too. But the key component of vermiculite is it provides also drainage, and drainage, I can't emphasize enough, is essential in your mix. Like, to be successful at growing seeds, you need drainage, because a lot of these seedling composts, a lot of these seed composts, plant composts, they're very, very hard to get. They're very, very hard to water. They don't absorb water very, very easily. So, and sometimes you might think that you've watered something, but if you pick it up, it actually feels very, very light. So pure compost on its own is a bad idea for seedlings, because what happens is that it gets too wet. It gets too wet around the roots. So, and then if it's too wet around the roots, that means that there's no space anymore for oxygen, right? So you get this counterbalance, this counterplay between I would call it like it's the difference between a compact soil and a loose. There's a term for it. What is the term for it now? Now that I'm thinking of it, friable. I think it's friable is the term. A loose sort of like loose kind of like compost which has the ability to provide drainage and has the ability to provide little gaps for roots to trace their way through and has the ability to provide drainage and all sorts of wonderful things like that. Like, but the don't take this for don't underestimate the importance of having some part of your compost mixture being something that will provide drainage. Now, you may not be able to find perlite or vermiculite. So in that case, how you doing, Regina? Welcome. Thanks for joining in. How you, Kendo? So if you can't get vermiculite and if you can't get perlite, what you could do is if you could find it, like they usually have this in, say, stores, is children's play sand is perfect. Don't use sharp sand. Don't use builder sand. Use children's play sand. That's what is recommended. So if you can't find the vermiculite perlite, children's play sand is perfect. And do it the same with the vermiculite and the perlite. Do it a 50-50 mix with your compost, and that will provide you loads and loads of drainage. Because when you think about like sand, like it's it's not very absorbent, so it creates exactly the same environment as the vermiculite would, like by providing space in between the it just provides space. I think that's the best way I can describe it, really. Like um, so we've discussed the water, we've discussed the temperature, oxygen, food, light, and the time, which should be fairly obvious, like, so we won't go too much into that because I know some people might even believe there's such a thing as time. So we do have to take that into consideration. But I'm not sure plants care, like, they seem to emerge when they're ready. I mean, like over the years, like I do, lots of seeds will have different germination rates too. So just be aware that, like, don't expect every seed to come up like at the specified time. Some will come up quicker than others. The quickest ones I do see coming up are your brassicas, which are your cabbages, basically. They come up really, really quick. Ganja germinates really, really quickly. Like ganja is pretty. You can actually it's better to germinate ganja on cotton wool, wet cotton wool. I found that very, very effective. So that's how I got my start into propagating ganja. So now that's the seed germination part of it. Now I have a couple of short videos now that I want to bring in. I want to talk about the propagation end of it, like, because this is essential. Like, I have a propagator myself personally at home. Like, I wonder if I can get a video up of it, or not a video, or just a picture of it to give you an idea what I'm talking about. Big free propagator. I wonder, does it come up just like that? Yeah, they'll do. They'll absolutely do. So basically, my propagation unit looks somewhat like this here. I'm sorry I can't get the pictures any bigger, but this is exactly my model here. I think it's a garland, right? It holds 3 seed trays, and as you notice, like, they all have a little hood on them. And on the top of the hood here, they have little vent holes so that you can sort of like relieve some of the moisture. So, because like in a propagation unit, you get a lot of moisture that builds up, and too much moisture can be really, really, really bad in the propagator. So you got little vent holes at the top. But to be honest, I've used these propagation units for a number of years now, and those little vent holes don't actually work that well. It could be more efficient. I don't know, but look, I'll give you tips and tricks if you do go down this road. Plus, I'll give you tips and tricks on how to. There's one of the seed trays with a little hood on it. Very, very simple. Very, very simple. And in one of these trays, you'd be very, very surprised how many plants you can actually sow in these Normally, I fill these little trays up with compost and sort of like compress it a small little bit. You don't want to compress it too much because like you need your soil nice and loose. It has to be loose. You know, bear in mind, soil has to be loose. If you put soil into a seed tray, it can't be too compact. Otherwise, the roots will have trouble getting established. So, and normally, like once I have one of these little trays filled, I usually get a pencil and I dib a little hole, little tiny little hole, just a fraction, about a millimeter deep into, and I'll put 9 holes this way, and there might be say 15 holes that way, and that's a massive amount of plants, right? That's you could be talking about 150 plants, like that sort of a way. But I'm only guessing there. I've never actually counted how many plants, but I do put a lot of plants into these seed trays, and so what I'll do in a moment now is I do have a video that I want to share about the planting process. And I'm sorry, there's probably people here who know all about this, like, but take it from me. There's a few actually who don't. So, seed sowing in 1 minute. Well, let me first get my audio straight. I don't want to end up like playing a video and no audio coming through.
It's that time again, it's seed sowing time. Today you're going to be sowing your aubergines, chilies and peppers. So you're going to need your seeds, you're going to need some labels and a pen. You're going to need your seed sowing equipment. I'm using a non-heated propagator with a lid, and this helps with the warmth for the seedlings. Inside you have your inserts. These ones are fit for 1 seed per cell as they're small, so they grow a really good root system. So I'm going to pop 1 seed per cell in here. This is peat-free compost. So let's get my seeds. I'm going to pop those just in there like so. And then I'm just going to cover them with a very small amount of compost. I'm going to gently press it down, and I'm going to water them with some warm water as that helps aid germination. I'm going to pop the lid on, pop it on the windowsill, and there you go, a 1-minute seed sowing session.
Now, and it's as simple as that. It really is as simple as that. So interesting to note what you said there about the warm water. And do you know what? I think she's probably correct about that warm water idea, because like some seeds do actually love warm water to get going. Like I'm thinking specifically of lupins. Lupins germinate really, really quickly with a drop of warm water. Soak them in warm water for a couple of hours or even overnight, and then they don't half grow quick, those guys. So you can see how easy it is. Just she doesn't do dipping any holes, something like that. She just whacks the seed in there and she just covers it with a small little bit of compost. It's as simple as that. Like, it couldn't be easier. Now, she was mentioning there about the cover. Now, she was saying that helps with the heat. Yes, she's correct. It does help with the heat, because if we wanted to replicate what she's doing, like if you think about any sort of a cover, plastic cover or a sheet of plastic, you could use a sheet of plastic. If you don't have one of those trays and a cover, you could just use a sheet of plastic, and a sheet of plastic will raise the temperature underneath it by about 2.5 degrees. So that should give you enough heat. So if you keep that magic number in mind, sheet of plastic, 2.5 degrees increase in heat. And that's all, and just remember that. So, and if it's very, very cold, whack another layer of plastic on, and you got 5 degrees underneath that cover there. So, I do use this method a lot out in the polytunnel at night time. Normally when I'm propagating a lot of seeds, I'll when they come off the propagation unit, I will chuck them into the polytunnel, and I'll cover them with a fleece. And basically, like, depending on how cold it is, I might have to double up on the fleece. I have to do that every year, actually. Double up at night time with the extra layer of fleece, especially if it's very, very cold. And that seems to alleviate any losses. But you have to remember, don't leave them covered all the time. Now, the problem with these covers now if you don't have a propagation unit, if you don't have seed trays, just use pots. Just use pots and use a sheet of plastic and just cover it with, just cover the pot with a piece of plastic, right? That's all you have to do. And like it could be so simple, like window boxes. Window boxes, for example, would be a good way. That's an interest, and like just if you could arrange some way just to keep the plastic up off, like what I might do would be put a couple of sticks down along the line of the window box, put a couple of small 9-inch pots on top of the sticks, and then lay the plastic out on top of it, so that the plastic doesn't get punctured by the wood. You know, I don't know if that's making any sense to you guys. I'll show you pictures of this later on, because I was actually doing it yesterday. I was planting some garlic outside, and I had to put some net down to keep the cats off it, because you know, I do spend maybe an hour go digging something like and put a load of plants in, and the cats will come on and they'll see, oh look, he's after digging, he's after moving all the soil. Let's go put it back. You know, I'm before pooping where there's pooping in it first, so I don't have to cover them here because they're devils. But anyway, I'll show you what I mean with the pots and the sticks and how to keep the nets up above the plant. But you can probably figure it out from what I'm saying anyway. But now, another interesting thing that you've got to keep in mind with these plastic covers, right? The plastic covers are great, but you can end up like having some serious problems in a while with too much moisture. When you've got too much moisture underneath the cover, that can lead to a whole range of problems, and they're usually fungal in nature, right? So if you think about it, you got the plastic cover on top of the propagation unit, or you have your plastic cover around your window flower box, and you can see the moisture building up, like, because there'll be droplets. The inside of the plastic will be totally wet, okay? You'll see the droplets everywhere. So in this case, like, if you allow that to continue to stay, too much moisture to hang around underneath that cover, what will happen is you could end up like with the plants will get like too wet. There'll be no oxygen getting in for another, like, you know, bear in mind, you got to have a balance of oxygen. So it needs careful management if you're going to go down this route with the plastic, like, and stuff like that. But it's very, very good for getting great results, like for like quick results, like the extra heat, and the plastic also holds the moisture in as well. It stops because if you think about it, if you had your propagation unit open all the time, the moisture will be evaporating out, and you'd be constantly watering all the time. So the cover provides two purposes really. It keeps some heat in, but it also holds the moisture in, which is also essential. Like, you need to be able to hold on to that moisture. It cuts down on your workload having to water, because it's very, very tricky, especially when seedlings are very small in a propagation unit all bunched together. And you can do a lot of damage when you're trying to water them. So the more moisture that you can hold in for as long as possible, the better. So, but one of the main problems that you can get, like, from having too much moisture under the cover is a virus called, well, it's not a virus, it's actually fungal. It's called damping off. I'll see if I can get a picture for you so that you'll know how to recognize it if you do see it in your propagation area. And you do have to manage this very, very carefully. If you see, like, what would happen in a nursery would be, if you've seen damping off, I don't know if you can see down there, you can see where the base of the stem is weakened, and it's kind of like, it looks like something is eating away at it. Here's another image of it here, like, you see the way it's all shriveled away. You know, a lot of people would initially, you might think that it was just like it was just like a weakly seedling, but no, that's a fungal infection, and that's caused by too much moisture, way too much moisture. There's another one there where you can see, like, the base of it is totally blackened off, and damping off disease, they call it there. So that's damping off, and that's one of the problems that you can encounter if you are not careful in the propagation area. So to counteract this damping off, like, what you would generally do in the nursery setting would be to take the covers off. You take the cover off every 2 days, maybe. Take the cover off and let the plants dry off. Basically, that allows some air into the system. It lets some air in, get some oxygen, and the plants dry off at the top. Okay, so generally, like, you do that once every 2 days in the nurseries, but like, you won't have to do it. Like, this is when they start to emerge out of the soil. Okay, once the seedlings start to emerge out of the soil, then you start your monitoring, and then you start controlling the moisture buildup levels, like, and so yeah, I think that's one of the key things that I can point. That's one of the main problems that you can find in the nursery set. But if you do get a problem with damping off, what they do in the nursery would be they throw the whole lot away. But I've had damping off here in my home settings loads of times, and what I usually do is I try to manage it. If I see damping off coming into the system, I just pull those seedlings out, get them out straight away, like, and hopefully that there's enough time. Hopefully I have enough time to get the rest of the seeds to germination before that fungal infection spreads even further. So usually I've been able to manage it like that. So but just remember, take the cover off every 2 days. Shake the plastic off. Let the plants dry out for about an hour, and then put the cover back on, and away you go. So we're at 22:11. I'm planning on an hour for this session. So what I want to do next is, when the seeds have been growing for a certain amount of time, usually, like, you won't even consider moving a seedling out of its location until it gets its first true leaf. Now, if you recall what we were discussing earlier, like, I was talking about the cotyledons, the first leaves that you see, the cotyledons, they're the food source. They're not leaves. So you want the first true leaf. So the next leaf that comes out will be when or maybe even wait for 2 or 3 leaves to come on, and then you will actually move them. Okay, so I do actually have a video of a lady here, I think, and she is basically running through the process of how to do the pricking out, because this is a delicate part. Like, this is probably the trickiest and most time-consuming part of dealing with seed trays and moving plants on into a more long-term situation. So let's see, have I got the right video here? Let me see. No, I don't want to open it on that page. I want to open it on another page. Bear with me just a second. It's cuntish being an amateur. Now, what we're going to be seeing here now is seedlings which are at their time to be moved on. So just bear with me now a second, and we'll watch this lady do her thing. I think this is a 2-minute long segment here, so it's not that long. Really.
Starting seeds off in a tray means that you can grow more all at once, and it also means that they get the temperature and the nutrients and the moisture that they need for a good start in life. In this tray, I'm growing a few different tomatoes, some amaranth, as well as a bit of cosmos. These seedlings have got their first true leaves, which are the second ones to sprout, and they look more like the adult plant leaves than the first rounded pair. This means they're now ready to be separated or pricked out and moved on to bigger pots. It's quite easy, and I'll show you how. When it comes to pricking out, you can treat most seedlings in the same way. Get the new pot ready and fill with potting mix so that you can transplant the seedlings straight away. Water the seedlings in their tray before you handle them, just to reduce the stress of the move. Using a dipping stick, in this case it's an old chopstick, or you can use an old pencil, dig down to get the root ball out as best you can intact. Hold it by the stem or the little leaves. As long as you're not squishing them too hard, they'll be just fine. Look at that, there's a dear little plant. Still using the dibber, make a hole in the new pot a little deeper and wider than the seedling root ball. Make sure that you make the dibbing hole deep enough so that the roots really go all the way down and they're nicely settled in so that they develop well. Gently pack it around and give them another watering. Make sure to keep them moist and in a spot out of the afternoon sun just till they settle in. It really is quite easy and it's economical, it's fun, so why not have a go every season?
Very good, very good. Now that's informative. Now, I hope you were paying attention to what she was doing there. She wasn't grabbing those by the stem. So basically, one of the most important takes when you're doing this procedure, right? When you're picking your seedlings out, don't grab the plants by the stem. She was very, very carefully grabbing the leaves, and she was actually grabbing the 2 leaves. But you can go back and you can have a look at that, and that's the most important thing about dibbing out. And just take your time when you're dibbing out. It's much more difficult getting started at it, like, you know, because you take you get your seed tray out of the propagation area, and then you got all these seedlings and just getting started. So like usually what I normally do is I just start in the corner section, and that's usually the trickiest part, just getting the first one out. Once you get the first few out, then it starts coming together, like. But just remember, if you're going to be putting a load of seeds into a seed tray onto the propagator, make sure that you use labels. Label everything, okay? It's vital that you keep these records, okay? So that, like, if you have a row of cabbages, you have a row of beetroots, and you have a row of cauliflowers and a row of Brussels sprouts, sometimes they can look very, very alike, and it's very, very easy to start getting things mixed up. So you want to keep things together as best you can, okay? Don't get things mixed up. I know you'll know what they are later in the year, like, but it just makes things so much handier when it's time to go plant the motherfuckers out into the garden, right? So labeling is very, very, it's very, very important, like, and at least then you'll know what you have, exactly what you have, and then it's much more easy to organize the whole garden thing at the end of the day. So I discussed then that's the pricking out, and that's moving them on to the pots. I thought the pot that you was putting them into was slightly too big. You know, I probably would have put it into a smaller pot, like, but that's just me. You know, you'll often hear about, like, I don't know if people have been. A lot of people will say that, like, you put and there's a lot of truth to this. If you put a plant into too big of a pot, it will get lost, and it will never grow right. I've seen this happen countless times. So usually, when you pick them out, put them into a smaller pot as you can get. Like, usually you get a little 9-inch pot. A little 9-inch pot would be perfect for potting on. Like, you know, once these plants are established, into a little 9-inch pot with a richer type of compost this time. And sometimes what I do, well, actually not sometimes, all the time, if I'm going to be keeping something in a pot, I will also add a little bit of extra food. I'd add extra food pellets in there as well too. So Osmocote is what I use. So you've probably seen them. They come in a little pot, in a little jar, small little balls, multicolored balls. They provide loads and loads of nutrients. You can get them in various types. You know, like, if you're just putting things into 9-inch pots, like, you know, you have to think, like, you don't want too rich an Osmocote because you're going to be moving them on fairly shortly. So perhaps you don't need the Osmocote straight away. Maybe because once plants start growing quick. So maybe just an ordinary compost to get them going. And if you're going to move them then into a bigger pot, maybe to store them for an extra month or two before putting them into soil, you might want to think about adding a little bit of Osmocote. I'll see if I can get a picture of it up for you, and so that you'll know what it looks like. Oh, I see Osmocote. Yeah, there we go. Holy God, I'm getting a little bit quicker at this. So this is Osmocote. It doesn't say which one this is, like, but you can get various different types of ones. This one here, it says, wait, it doesn't say. Oh yeah, this one, it says 6. This will be enough to keep a plant going for 6 months, and you won't be using much of this. Like, you really don't use too much of this Osmocote. You just need a small. There's a very, very precise. Pay close heed to the ratios that are specified on the packets of these products, like, because they're very, very rich, like. So, and you don't need very, very much in your mixture to provide enough plant to keep a plant going for 6 months. You're talking about maybe maybe 10 or 15 small pellets would do it, like, but you'll understand, like, they're usually fairly well indicated on the box or the packet or whatever it is that you're. So that's the. So we've done the pricking out. We've done the potting on. And there was one more thing that I want to mention before I wind this show up now tonight, and that's the importance of water. Okay. Now, yeah, I know, sounds silly, the importance of water. Of course, water is important, but I'm going to talk about another aspect now of water, which probably most people don't know, and you wouldn't know unless you had worked in a nursery area. Now, water is great, like, but too much water is a killer. And this is the single biggest mistake most people are going to make, is by giving their plants too much water. Now, remember what I was saying earlier on in the propagation unit, where if you have too much water in the propagation unit, there'll be no air, there'll be no oxygen, and the seedlings will rot. And this is especially true also for young plants that you've put on into the pot, okay? Just be very, very careful at the very, very early stages of seed growth. You do not want that compost too wet, because that is going to kill your plant. You just need to give it enough. Now, normally what I would do, I don't water compost from the top. Normally what I do would be, I'd have a little container or something that I could pile maybe 15 or 20 small pots into, and have a little bit of water at the base of that container, so that the pots will absorb the water up slowly from underneath. But you want to be sure that you don't give these plants too much water at the early stages. I think that's the most important thing I would like to highlight about watering. And obviously, like, as the plants start to grow and mature, they'll get more. They'll be growing much more aggressively. They'll be using the water up at a higher rate. But I'm going to be talking about watering more in shows to come. Okay, I'm not going to go too deep into the watering aspect of it right here and right now, because what we want to do is we just want to get started. Okay, and I'll be visiting these topics over and over and over again as we go through the growing season. So don't worry too much about it at the moment. If you can just get your seeds started, and with the few tips that were given by those wonderful videos on the poo tube, and that should be enough to get you going, really, to be honest. And we'll deal with potential problems and stuff like that later down the road. Like, watering is like, I remember when I was studying horticulture, like, we spent several classes on watering. Oh, they really hammered watering into our heads, into our noggins, like, so, because obviously, like, we were working in a nursery, we had massive big polytunnels to manage, like, and like, to go in and water in the tunnel is such a difficult thing to do. It's so you wouldn't believe how difficult it is, because you got tens of thousands of plants, like, and you're going around with a hose, and you can't get the water on the top of the plants. You've got to get in at the base underneath the foliage, because the last thing you want is water on the foliage, for the same reason that we don't want water on the foliage too much underneath the propagation unit. So, and then when you put your hose underneath the plant at the pot, you turn the hose on, you count 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000, 5, 1,000, 6, 1,000. And then you go on to the next. But you'd have to do that 2 or 3 times, because Compost is very rare stuff. It's very, very hard to work with. It doesn't absorb water very easily. You might be watering, you might be spraying a shit pile of water onto a compost, onto the compost in a pot, and you might have been spraying for maybe 5 minutes. You lift that pot up. It's probably still not heavy. Most of the water will probably end up going right through it and not get absorbed in at all, which is why, there's a very, very precise method for watering. And we'll go into that further down the road when we get that far. Obviously we're not going to have to worry about that just at this early stage. If we're just going to be getting seedlings going and getting them started, and, we'll, so just make sure that you don't have too much water in your propagation unit, okay? Just don't overwater inside that unit, because the young seedlings, it's going to do them a lot of harm, too much water in there. If you do end up putting too much water in, and you think you've put too much water in, make sure that you take that cover off a lot more regularly, and maybe try to evaporate some of that water off. That could be trickier to do if you're not working on a propagation with a propagator unit, but you should be able, inside, if you're doing it just indoors under just a sheet of plastic or something like that, it'll probably take a little bit more time for that water to evaporate off. So that might be something you can do if you do find yourself in a situation where you've overwatered. And I'm just trying to think, is there anything else of importance that I wanted to add to this particular session? By the way, do you have any questions? I'm not sure. Oh, good God. The comment section has gone way ahead of me here. Jenny's laughing at my comment about sand and the propagation unit. So, yeah, I'm not joking, man. I'm not joking. Somebody's sorry for saying something. I'm going to keep going. Because I don't know how far ahead you guys are. What I'll do is I'll skip down as far as I can go, just to get up to date with the chat. I didn't realize we were on pause there. So if you have any questions, put them in now. I'll try and scroll back a little bit and see if I've missed any questions. I hope you're putting them in all caps so that they actually stand out a bit, so that I'll know there's a question. But hopefully in the coming weeks, I will get a little bit more proficient at doing this. I seen that too, Tony. And you know what? I was just thinking to myself, Stu, take your meds. That's the first thing I was thinking. I actually clicked on through. Do you know who posted it? Sherry Tenpenny. And I was just and I was thinking, Stu, take your bloody meds. He's not well in the head, that chap. 2 million a month, man. Fucking hell. So I'm not seeing any questions. And don't put your propagator in the microwave. Well, unless you want to protect it from an EMP strike, then work away with that microwave, So this is exactly what I was intended to do, just an hour show, right? I hope this was of some assistance to anybody who's been wondering where to start. What seeds have you got, Dinny? Over a year old. I'd imagine they'd be okay. Like if they're cabbages and stuff like that, like cabbages are good for about 3 years or so. Like, no problem. There should be no problem with those seeds. A year old. A lot will depend too on conditions that you store seed. Like usually you'd store seed in a cool, dark environment. So if they were stored fairly reasonably well, there should be no problem with them, I'd imagine. What you could do is just put 1 or 2 seeds onto a damp cotton wool and just see if they work, That's what I'd try, maybe. Oh, Rick Simpson seed. Oh, yeah, man. If they're only a year old, they should be fine. They should be good to go. Last year, the seeds I used were 2 years old, right? And they were fine. Absolutely fine. and they were my own homegrown seed, and they're not stored in the best conditions. Like, I'm a little bit slapdash like that. I don't do things perfect or by the book all the time. I just tend to throw stuff together, and if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. I'll go get more. And the easiest seeds to start off growing. If you want to start off growing, I would recommend cabbages. They're so easy. Beetroots, really easy. Turnips, really, really easy. Ganja, really, really easy. There's things like parsnips and carrots. I will discuss parsnips and carrots more at a later date, because they're slightly different. They're not like and you'll be sowing them outdoors. So as we get closer to their sowing time, I'll probably discuss them more at that stage. But yeah, brassicas, cabbages, ganja, turnips, lupins. Lupins are great. Get lupins. Lupins are so easy, man. So easy, and get loads of lupins into your garden, because they give nitrogen back into the soil. They're an amazing plant, and they look great. They look great. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to call it quits at that now, I think. And what I'll do is, if anybody wants to pop in for an old chat, I can't promise I'm going to stay too long, right? Because I want to have dinner and I want to go to work tomorrow. So, but look, you're very, very welcome to join in and chat among yourselves or whatever, take the piss out of each other, kill each other for all I care. It's all right. It's all good. So I'll probably run another show next Sunday, okay? I have a plan this week. I was out yesterday digging up garlic and dividing garlic. So if I get the opportunity this week, I might take a few videos of me doing garlic and dividing them, putting them into the ground and stuff like that. So hopefully, time permitting anyway. So I might be able to do some of that. And if I can get the camera working right, so I don't know how I'm going. I have a stand. I think I have a stand that might actually work, but I'm not sure. So anyway, so watch out for that. Next Sunday I'll probably do a bit on plant division, which is another really easy way to propagate plants. So and hopefully I'll have a little bit of input from my own garden maybe on that particular topic. If I had my act together yesterday, I would have got a video of me doing at the time. I only thought about it after I had it done. And says, Jesus, it would have been a good idea if I'd done that. But anyway, I have more garlic to plant, so I'll try and get that documented on video. So yeah, thanks, Paula. Yeah. Thanks, Tony. Much appreciated. Well, my wild garlic is still not up yet, Denny, for some reason. Maybe it died during the year, but it shouldn't have. Actually, do you know what? I actually haven't even checked on it. I only had one, so I'm hoping to get a little bit more now this year. So we'll see. But anyway, I've got loads of garlic in the garden, and I put some into the dinner pot earlier on. It's actually grown. It's growing outside, so it's got its green leaves on, and then when you dig it up, and the smell of garlic coming off it would like knock you out. Like, can't wait to taste it. So anyway, look, guys, I've got to love yous and leave yous, and we'll chat to you all on Sunday. Tuesday night. Oh, I'm not that drunk yet. No, give me another hour or two. But don't forget Cookie and Pete tomorrow night. So that's going to be it for me for now. Goodbye.